and welcome to VIBEZ Daily. This is a daily devotional curated by VIBEZ Church to help you practice the way of Jesus and be all that God has called you to be. You have joined us for our year-long series titled Devoted. Acts 2:42 tells us that the followers of Jesus were devoted to the apostles' teaching, to fellowship, to breaking of bread, and to prayer. This podcast was created to provide context and commentary for what you read each day. Just before our friends begin discussing today's reading, we want to invite you not only for fellowship, but for prayer as well. We have created the VIBE Daily Chat Group to offer you fellowship and a community where you can state your observations, ask questions about the reading or the podcast. You can join us by downloading the VIBEZ Church app in your favorite app store. Click Join the Conversation and join us today. And finally, we hope that you can join us for prayer. Prayer happens Monday through Friday, and more information on that can be found on the VIBEZ Church app under prayer. Now, let's begin our conversation on today's reading.
All right, welcome back to the VIBEZ Daily podcast and the Devoted series. This is day 46, and so excited to be joined again by my wife, Victoria, my friend Shameeka, as we continue to journey through Numbers this week. Yesterday, it was really starting to get good. We're starting to get some drama and some activity and really learning a lot about God and his relationship with his people. It was kind of one of my big takeaways yesterday. But we continue in that. In chapter 16, a little bit more drama here, not just between God and his people, but now between the people of God themselves, right? So when we come into chapter 16, the Korathites, which you guys kind of emphasized in some of the responsibility that they had. I think, Victoria, you pointed out earlier this week, just probably the air they carried themselves with because they touched the most holy of holy stuff.
Right.
They kind of lead somewhat of a rebellion here against Moses and Aaron. What do you guys take away here from chapter 16 and kind of how this rebellion played out?
Yeah, I think it once again, just like I mentioned before, the tribe of Levi, like this anger and this rage that we've seen and talked about, like it really shows itself again here.
Yeah.
And so I just think it's funny. Yeah, there's this pompousness to them about, for all in the congregation of for all in the congregation are holy and just filling themselves for sure. But like, I feel like the response that Moses gives back to them is just like, well, like, is it not enough? Like, is it not enough that like you have been set apart? You've been consecrated.
Right.
You have been given the privilege of the most holy things, right? Like, is it not enough that you are servicing the Lord himself, like, closely? Mm-hmm. And now, like, you want the priesthood? Like, what's next, right? Like, it's never going to be enough for you. And so, I think, I think it was very interesting.
Yeah. I'm glad that you said that because it definitely seemed like this arrogance of like, I want more power. Like what I have isn't enough. Because like you said, like they were the ones that had the most special, like out of the Levites, like just kind of task. And yeah, like he literally like put together a whole gang of people to go against Moses. That was pretty wild.
And it makes me think, like you said, like this, now y'all big and bold talking about y'all holy and close to the Lord. But remember when they were first got into the wilderness area and the Lord showed up on the mountain and everybody was scared of like how the thunder and the light and all that. And he said that, like everyone else moved away from the mountain and Moses was the only one that drew near.
Yeah.
And it's just like, have you not seen him like have this personal relationship with the Lord where he disappears with the Lord and the Lord comes down? His face is probably still shining. Like, does he still have the veil and the shining face? Like, you probably have all these signs that he is set apart. Like, he is, and it's this jealousy factor, right? Or,
Yeah.
Might be that same spirit of jealousy that was going around with the men thinking that their wives was cheating.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely, again, this is the human condition, right? To always want more, always want power. It's why, the Bible teaches us that, pride comes before the fall, right? Leads to destruction.
Like, literally here.
Yeah, like, fall through a big hole, huh? Yeah, and so it's definitely a human condition. I think I love just the display of God's justice, though. Like, I just love that, like, Moses, and it's something that we've kind of seen time and time again, but that people can say, like, God, you can judge. I leave the judgment to you. You judge between us. Like, let's just take it to the Lord. We're going to put it towards, and God will decide. He'll decide which of us. And Moses really makes it clear, like, and I'm going to even take it out of my hands. If it's not me, or if it's supposed to be, like, we're just going to, it's going to be regular. If it's supposed to be, God going to do something supernatural. Something I could not have done. Like, it could not have been me. And we're going to leave it up to him. And God does just that. It says, like, before he was even able to finish speaking, this is 31, just as he finished speaking all these words, the ground beneath them just splits open, right?
Yeah.
Like, he could barely finish what he was saying, and God was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna declare here kind of whose side I'm on in this issue. And I love that, because I think personally it just, for me, frees me from feeling like I gotta defend myself all the time from stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that I gotta declare my innocence or fight my own battles, but I could just say, Lord, you judge.
Yeah.
Like, you judge. And either they're gonna, they'll know, or I'll know by the time it's said and done. But you know what? It's not even for me. Like, you decide and you judge.
Yeah.
And I even love, I'm sorry.
Oh, you go ahead.
I even love in verse 15, to your very point, like, Moses was very angry, and then he said to the Lord, it wasn't even like he went back and forth with the Kohathites, right? Like, he was just like, I'm angry, and then he just directed his anger and his frustration and, like, his venting to the Lord, which is something I know that, like, I've really been trying to practice doing, because it's much easier to, like, vent to someone else, but, like, I'm like, okay, Lord, you see, like, do you see, Lord? Because, like, like you say, you be the judge, like, you either check me or check them, right? But I think it's so funny, what made him so angry was the fact that they had the nerve and the audacity to say that they were brought from Egypt. Yeah. The land flowing with milk and honey. Were you about to say that? Okay, I'm going to let you take it.
No, I was just going to say that because it was like, there it is. Y'all perception is that the land that was flowing of milk and honey is Egypt and not the promised land that he's bringing you to. So their minds was so limited to, like, Egypt was the best of the best. That was the best that they've seen. And they didn't realize that there's, like, God is actually taking out some more. Yes. And so their mind is so stuck on, like, what we perceive as more is what we had back in Egypt. Even in the harsh conditions, like, that was abundance to us. And so, I just thought that was interesting, too. Their response, like, they was like, nah, we're not coming. And ultimately, like, oh, yeah, Egypt was a place with milk and honey.
Right. Which is crazy. And then they're like, and moreover, you have not brought us into the land flowing with milk and honey. And I'm like, well, he tried. Y'all didn't go. Yeah. Y'all sat there and was trying to stone Moses and Aaron and go back to Egypt. Like, if the Lord had the opportunity right in front of y'all.
Yeah.
And then they had the nerve to say, do you want to treat these men like slaves? Like, it's kind of like, it's thrown it in his face, like, their experience with Egypt, as if Moses is Pharaoh. Right. Like, Moses is not being Pharaoh to you. Oh, they play too much.
Yeah. Also, just, I mean, I love that God is, again, in his justice, he really handles everybody, not just those Kohathites. But I mean, it says ultimately here in verse 49 that, like, 14,700 were those who died from this plague, like, in addition to those who died because of the Korah incident, right? That, like, he's pretty much just like, look, if you spoke up or you just agreed with those who spoke up, like, at the end of the day, man, like, I'm gonna make clear here that you guys, you can't continue, like, and I think you see this consistency with God, that, like, he understands. Even going back to, we talked about yesterday, I think the guy who kind of violated the Sabbath, that, like, if I allow it now, it's only going to spread, right? Like, it's only going to, and so, like, I got to shut it down, cut it off. It's very similar to a teaching of Jesus where he's like, yeah, if your eye is causing you to sin, gouge it out. If your hand is causing you to sin, cut it off. Like it's this thing like if there's a part of us that's going to infect us in sin, we just got to get rid of it. We got to we got to cut it off. And so there's like this wiping. And it's interesting, I think, Shameeka, you said the other day, like, we expect them to grow, like these people are growing, but they kind of going reducing in number at this point. Like this is now the second or third plague where like we've just lost people by the thousands at this point, right? So they came to the promised land with 600K, and they might get into the promised land a little less than that by the time it's all said and done.
Which is God fulfilling what he said he would do, is that like y'all not entering in. They got to die somehow, whether it's through natural causes or the Lord wiping them out because of their disobedience. Like this is him plucking out that generation. Starting that purge of that generation. But one thing that really stuck out to me, when we see Moses again trying to make atonement for the people in the midst of these, like the ground getting swallowed up and the plague and stuff that happened, like Moses is like, he came up with a game plan quick. He was like, quick, Aaron, go get the incense and do this and do that. But what was interesting to me is that this was a risky thing that Aaron did. My translation say that Aaron stood in between the living and the dead. He's a priest. He's not supposed to be near these dead bodies. And like he's basically being this bridge between them to ultimately try to atone for them and their bodies. And we don't see any kind of wrath or anything from the Lord towards him. I just thought that was interesting. That was just really risky for him as a priest to be close to a dead body, knowing that he wasn't, supposed to.
That's good. I'm glad you pointed that out. Yeah. It's like it even dawned on me that like he was that close to death, and dead people. That's interesting. Yeah, it's good. I think I love even once again just how like the Lord showed up to on Moses' behalf when Aaron and Miriam was talking about him. I think I see this again here in like starting in verse 41 when it's talking about the congregation came and grumbled against them again. And in verse 42 it just says that the cloud like showed up, right? And it's kind of like the Lord just showed up like on their behalf, like once again we know the Lord's listening and the Lord hears everything that's happening and is watching. And so once again I see the Lord intervening. But I love when he's just like, I'm about to consume them like right now, like back up. And then they fall on their faces and they make this plea. But like before like they're even able to go back and forth, because sometimes Moses and the Lord goes back and forth. Like before they even are able to go back and forth, like the Lord didn't wait. No, the plague just started. Right. And so it's like I think the Lord was like, enough's enough. Like
yeah, but I mean, obviously, it wasn't for the Israelites, because in 17 they continued to complain, and God gives Israel, Israel signed through Aaron's staff, right? And just kind of has this interesting thing where like it buds with almonds and flowers and all this kind of stuff, and it's supposed to be this sign to the people of Israel. Again, just so that they can just be reminded. I think it's verse 10. It tells us in 17 that the Lord told Moses, put Aaron's staff back in front of the testimony to be kept as a sign for the rebels, so that you may put an end to their complaints before me, or else they will die. So it's supposed to be this reminder of that. But verse 12, very quickly.
Here they go again.
Complaining about being lost and perishing, and really not kind of getting the picture. But before we move to 18, was there anything else in 17 that you guys thought was interesting? I know it's a brief chapter, and I kind of quickly summarized that there, but okay. So 18, it's again, as a reminder, it's not always chronological in what we read here, in the way that it's organized, but we do get again kind of just provision for how the priests are ultimately provided for. Is kind of how it starts here. And really the most of 18 is kind of what that covers. Anything you guys thought was interesting in the way that God kind of looked out for the priests and the Levites?
Yeah, I love in verse 7. It says, I give your priesthood as a gift. And And I just love that, like, jumping down to verse 12. It's like, all the best oil, all the best wine, and of the grain, the first fruits of what they give to the Lord, I give to you, the first ripe fruits of all the land in their land. And I'm just like, okay, yeah, he's giving them the best of the best.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like, this priesthood is a gift to you. And through this, like, I'm giving you, like, not scraps.
Yeah.
I'm not saying, like, you know, don't work and then I'm going to give you a little something. Like, it's like, don't work, let me provide for you. And I'm giving you the best of the best. And I love jumping down to verse 20 just to tie back into this whole thing that, like, it says that you'll have no inheritance in the land, neither shall you have any portion among them. It says, I am your portion and your inheritance among the people of Israel. And I love it that it's like, you don't need the land. You don't need the stuff. You don't need the land. You don't need any of that. You need me. Like, I am your portion, like, which is the greatest gift of all. Right? And it's like, and when the Lord's their portion and he is all what they need, like, we see that he has given them the best. Like, I'm going to take from everyone, you know, that everybody's been working hard for, and I'm going to give it to you as a gift, right? It was just beautiful.
Yeah. I just was thinking about this as you were talking, and I'm like, again, it's hard to remember everything, but I was just thinking about how they were complaining about just only having manna and wanting to eat quail, and thinking about how the priests, you know, and the people, they were able to eat meat, right? Because they were. So were they the only ones eating meat?
No.
So
like, I feel like the people, because they get a portion, right? Like in the gift, the offerings, like the voluntary offerings. There's one of them that, like, the whole community can eat with the Lord. It's the communal ones. I forget which one it is, but it's one where, like, they gave a piece of the priest, they give the priest, and then, like, they can take the rest of that to them home with them.
Gotcha.
Or not home, but, like, they can eat it themselves, them and their families. And so there is a portion of this meat, like, that they can eat.
Maybe they wasn't giving enough offerings.
Give you an offering.
Yeah, no, I do think that's good. It is this, like I said, I do love that my portion, like, I'm your portion piece, that because there is something they are giving up. They're giving up the pursuit of just wealth and some of the other things, and land and inheritance, some of those things that a lot of the Israelites had. But there is that satisfaction with just being fully dependent on God, right? And so, like, you know, I wonder how much they maybe envied some of what the other Israelites had, but they were essentially models and examples for, like, what our life and our relationship with God should be, which is this sole dependency on Him, and that's what they were called to be, set aside as, was that example for the rest of us.
That's good.
So,
This tithe.
Yep, the tithes.
you said what?
Were you gonna go to the tithes?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just think that it was interesting that that they were supposed to tithe on top of that tithe, right? Like that they received the tithes, and it's like, okay, but you still have to give up something too, right? Like you can't just receive all of this blessing; you still have to give a portion back to me.
Yeah, 10th of a 10th.
Yeah.
It's good. Yeah, it still teaches that same generosity is still expected of them. That's good. Okay. Well, we go into 19, and this is kind of an interesting kind of a ritual that they're teaching again, and some of this stuff sounds a little repetitive in some ways to some of the things that we've talked about as far as offerings that they're bringing. But anything that you guys thought was interesting in 19 specifically that stuck out to you guys as you went through it?
There is, at first, you know, reading this, because a lot of this stuff does sound redundant, but it's talking specifically about, like, just kind of the way to go about, like, if you encounter, like, a dead body and all those different things. And it dawned on me that, like, well, this was important and something that God needed to kind of, like, reiterate or even lay down, because there's a lot of dying that's about to happen. There's a lot of dying that's going to take place. We already saw, like, a lot of them already got wiped out, but you know, just him still prioritizing important of what it looks like to be clean, to be ceremonially clean, to be, you know, that holy and set apart, but in response, like what to do when you do enter into certain circumstances where you're going to be around a dead body. So yeah, I thought it was intentional and not a coincidence that we're having to have this conversation, because we have a whole generation that's not going to make it into the promised land, that's going to have to die.
That's a really good observation. It is, because
they have like 38 years like still left until they go into the promised land. So that's a lot of time. That's a lot of dead bodies.
It is. And to add to the layers, it just showing you things that now happen, like with the home, like not just are people unclean, but like in verse 16, 15, if there's like an open vessel of any sort inside the home, right? That's unclean too. And so it's like, once again, more details on top of details.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things I thought was interesting, and this kind of, again, is some foreshadowing to me about kind of even Jesus's place in history and for us, is verse 20. I thought was interesting that like a person who is unclean cannot purify himself, like does not purify himself. That like it required a clean person to purify an unclean person, and it you know, just kind of theologically, it's what was so significant about Jesus as God himself and as one who was without sin. Like he was literally the only one who could offer a sacrifice that could clean us as unclean people, right? As sinful people. I just thought it was interesting that it was just kind of established early on, like, there's nothing you can do to purify yourself if you're unclean. Like, if you're unclean, like, nothing you can do will actually lead to purification, but it takes the one who is clean, you know, to be able to clean you up and purify you. And so, like I said, to me, it just felt like this small little nod to Jesus, like, and what he would ultimately do for us, you know, a few thousand years later.
Yeah. It's like he became unclean for us to be clean.
Yeah.
But it was cleansing all of us, and then was able to cleanse himself and get back up.
It's back to the
gangsta.
Yes.
Straight gangsta.
Yeah. Okay. So, chapter 20, where we end today, actually also gives us a couple ends as well. We get to see first where Moses' journey is going to end, and we also get to see where Aaron's journey is going to end, and just kind of some insight into those. So it starts with a story that's actually similar to something we read in Exodus, where the Israelites are thirsty again, and they're grumbling and they're complaining about it, because they always do. And so, again, if only we had perished. And God kind of gives Moses instructions on how to get water from this rock again. Very similar thing to what happened. What was interesting to you guys about how this played out this time?
Same thing. Same story. Like, well, different in the sense of Moses' response. But, I went back to Exodus 17, which is where the original water from the rock situation happened. And it's like, man, we're generations later and we still see the way that they handled it be the same. Again, we're not seeing the people coming to Moses or praying to God or like really coming in a space where it's like, hey, we're really like thirsty, can we have some? No, they're doing the same thing. They're quarreling, then they're going to Moses, they're complaining, and then Moses having to go to God and be like, all right, now, like, these people coming to me wanting something to drink. And so it was just unfortunate to see that, but I can understand why, because they saw their fathers and their, like, you know, the generation before reacting that way. And so now they're doing the same.
Yeah, I mean, I just think obviously what jumps out to me is just, like you said, that may have been the typical response from the Israelites, but this is a out of character response from Moses. for just about everything else we've read thus far, Moses tends to just follow God's instruction as he's given him, right? It's been one of the things that we have talked about repeatedly, with Leviticus, or even early on, that like, man, to the detail, like, this is how you're supposed to build it, so this is how this is supposed to go, and how you're supposed to anoint them. Like, for just about everything, he has followed every detail.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this time, God tells him to speak to the rock.
Yeah.
And he raises his hand and he strikes it twice with his staff. And like, yeah, it's just like, what in my mind, I'm like, Moses, what's come over you? Like, what happened? And I mean, I assume he's just frustrated, he's upset. I mean, the way he talks to him, right? Listen, my version says, listen, you rebels, must we bring water out of this rock for you? And so like, yeah, it's interesting that, like, for whatever reason, this seems like out of character for him. But I think that's the part. It's just like, when at some point the people have war on you for you to eventually like step out of kind of your typical experience with God.
It definitely seemed like he let his anger get the best of him. It was like, let's just expedite this thing. Like, let me just go ahead and do it. But then part of me wondered, because I don't know how old Moses is at this point, but part of me wondered if, like, I almost want to give him grace. Like, maybe he forgot this instruction about speaking because he was thinking about when God said it before, it was to strike it. So, again, don't know if that was the case. But part of me was like, I wonder if that was it, because it was a familiar thing that he's experienced before, but this time it's different instruction. And I felt like that was just a nugget to really take, because a lot of times, like, we'll for ourselves, we'll enter into different seasons but similar circumstances, and just because God instructed us to do something a certain way doesn't mean that instruction is the same. Like, we always have to be like attentive to his voice to know, like, okay, well, God, I know you've had me handle it this way before, but what are you saying in this situation?
And I want to say, like, it seemed from his speech as if it was more like, we're bringing this water out of the rock.
Yes.
More than God, because he normally always points back to God. Let the Lord provide. The Lord will bring this. The Lord will do this for us. The Lord will deliver us. But like, it's like he said, because he's done it before. I wonder if he's like, oh, I know this trick. You know, kind of like the magicians, right? I can, I've seen this trick. We can maneuver stuff and boom, boom, tap this rock twice. Special type of rock. Water's going to come out of it, right? And so I think here is like, shall we bring water for you out this rock? And it was kind of like he said, what we're going to do for you, right? And then he strikes it. And then the Lord's response, though, wasn't like a because or this, that, or the other. It was like, because you did not believe in me. To uphold me as holy in the eyes of the people of Israel. Like, that's why you're not coming into land. It's like, I told you to speak to it. It's probably, he said, an uncommon thing to do to speak to a rock and to have water come out. We've seen it done before, that you can strike a rock and the water come out. But like this time, he said, I'm testing you and showing the people my holiness.
Exactly.
And that you don't have to strike the rock. You can speak to this rock in the name of Jesus, right? Or not Jesus, because he's not here yet. But, through the Lord's instruction, and it respond, right? And so it was an opportunity to demonstrate the Lord's holiness.
For sure.
And they took it as themselves, like the honor for themselves. Which, to me, is like, he hasn't made a whole lot of mistakes, right? Like, he really hasn't. But
that's a big one to make in front of the community. Because, like the Lord was saying, is like, you guys are the example. They already have issues as it is. So, like, because of that, like, there has to be a consequence for it.
And I think to your point, like, there's two things. Like, one, like you said, it is before the people, right? Which is a big deal, because who is he supposed to represent before the people? Like, that is his whole role. So, like, if even Moses is stepping out, right, before the people, like, that is a big deal. And with greater responsibility and greater, authority comes greater responsibility, like expectations, like, from God, right? He even teaches that in the New Testament, that, like, we're going to hold the preachers, teachers elders to a higher standard than we are everyone else. And so I think there is that. I also, like, in my opinion, I feel like God has also shown Moses a lot of grace at this point, because we do get a lot of like back and forth from Moses. We talked about what it was in Exodus, where he didn't even like want to go before Pharaoh in the first place, right? So like, I do, but I think is again a lot of it is because it was before the people and what the role he was supposed to play for them, and ultimately again. It's not like he just drops him dead right then and there. He lives for a long time after. He just does not get to ultimately enter the promised land. So, but again, I feel like it's a fair and just response from God. But,
for sure.
Yeah. So just before we get to, Aaron dies kind of here at the end of 20, and the people kind of mourn. But there's this interesting passage here from 14 to 21, where they're trying to kind of pass through Edom, which, if we recall, just a real quick, ancestry lesson again as a reminder, the people of Edom are the people of Esau. Esau's kind of descendants create Edom. Esau, of course, being Jacob's brother. So these is kind of like they distant cousins here, Esau and Jacob becoming Israel, right? So Esau and Israel, their descendants. It's kind of where we are here. So it's through Edom they're trying to get through it, and it doesn't kind of work out the way they hoped. Anything that you guys thought was interesting in this passage before we kind of wrap up today?
Those Edomites, they was like, family or not, nope, they're not coming through. I thought that was interesting how there was no kind of like honor or obligation because of family. They were just like, no, it's a lot of y'all. Like, y'all not coming through here. That definitely stuck out to me.
Yeah. It says, thus says your brother Israel. I love that. Like he just says, like, hey, bro.
Right.
Like, nah.
Had to remind them of the story of how they came out of Egypt. Like, let me butter you up first and tell you everything that happened.
We've been through it. He's like, nah, you stole our birthright.
That part. We ain't forget. We got history too.
I was saying, we was supposed to be going to the promised land. Right. That was supposed to be our promised land that you talking about.
Now, come on.
Yeah, it is very interesting. And again, I wonder kind of why it's included, like, where the Israelites trying to hold a grudge. Is that why Moses is writing this down? Like, y'all don't forget what the Edomites did to y'all, down the road. But, it is very interesting that they kind of denied it. But I think, to me, it points to ultimately, like, God had a plan in the direction for where he was trying to head them. Take them, and oftentimes they tried to go outside of that, right? And they
take shortcuts or whatever.
Right. And cut across. And, I just thought it was interesting, their response to them.
And can I just point this out? Because we are about to, you kind of alluded to Aaron's death, and we do see this whole thing take place where they removed his garments. They kind of like passed the baton on to his sons.
Yeah.
But y'all, we started off this in chapter 20 with Miriam dying, and I feel like she didn't get any kind of like recognition. Not even just like, I mean, we ain't really say nothing, but it's just like, oh, Miriam died and she was buried. That's all we got. But
there was no water.
It was like we didn't hear about the people mourning for her or anything, which we normally kind of like see or hear, but we do get to see that, at least with Aaron, that they mourn for him for 30 days. I always think it's so weird kind of that they mention how many days they mourn. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know if there was this like this thing where there was a certain amount of time that they normally would mourn for someone, or if it was trying to show that, like, because 30 days is not a lot to me, honestly. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I mean, I think if you consider what their mourning looked like, it is. Because it's, yes, to answer your question, the length of mourning was often a signal or a sign of like the significance of the person you're mourning for, right? And so, like, if I mourn for a couple days, 2-3 days, like, it was special, but if I mourn for 30 days, it's like, wow, like that person was really important. Because their mourning was literally like a stop everything you're doing and just like it's weeping, it's gnash, it's sackcloth and ashes. It's just, it's like we just gonna stop, and all we're focused on it's like, if you think about what we kind of consider now just a moment of silence, like where we just kind of, everybody just pauses and takes a moment to reflect. It's just like doing that for 30 days. Like all we're thinking about as a camp is man.
Yeah, it's like a 30-day funeral, right?
Yeah.
Like,
that makes it. Yeah, that's a really good analogy.
Like you just imagine it just a wake, right? Where everybody's just all black and dressed and just spending 30 days. And,
this gloom over. Yeah.
That's kind of what it was. So,
okay. That puts it in perspective for sure.
Yeah. But like I said, that show, despite all the back and forth and all the ways they tried to kill him and usurp him and take his role, that they still realized he was important.
Right.
When he was dead. Yeah.
Which is so like us.
Just trying to stone him.
It's so like us. We wait till people die before we really appreciate kind of what they did for us. But
yeah.
And I just love the certainty of the Lord's words here. Like he's about to die, right? He's about to go up on this mountain and be gathered to his people. And like as soon as you mentioned, Shameeka, like they passed the cloak over, like, and he died. Like it was just so certain, like what was happening. Like just to know that, like, hey guys,
give him a heads up.
About to go on up here, but you're not coming back. Like, and for it to be so certain, right? Like. And it really just shows who's control of our bodies, right?
Yeah.
Like who really is the author of life. Like, because when he says your time's up, the time was up.
Yeah. Yeah. And I said you wasn't entering his promised land.
Yeah. So give me the cloak.
Yep.
Sorry.
God just no empathy. He doesn't care. He just wants his cloak back.
I'm just kidding.
He just wants his cloak back. Yeah. Okay. Well, that brings us to the conclusion of today's reading, and we'll come back tomorrow to do 4 more chapters to end this week. But again, hopefully this has been helpful to you, along with your reading throughout this. But we look forward to seeing you tomorrow as we finish this week through Numbers. Take care.
Thank you for joining us for the VIBEZ Daily podcast. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, or download our favorite, the VIBEZ Church app. Visit vibes.church/devoted for additional episodes, notes, details, and the latest merch. Join us next time as we continue our journey through the Bible. Take good care.